So Russia's Vladimir Putin has finally admitted that Russia's economy is reaching an effective point of no return. In a stunning set of revelations, be them political theatre or economic desperation, Putin has admitted what many people, including myself, have been long suspecting, that his war machine is under severe strain. He said point blank that defence spending will be cut, and he continued to praise Trump. But that's just what he said on the surface, because behind the scenes, Russia is facing continued issues over LNG supply and is quietly flooding China with metals, be them copper, aluminium, nickel, all to keep his war economy alive. Moreover, the Kremlin is continuing to lock down even more over statistics, classify economic data, and make it more and more of a crime to talk about mobilization, trade, or even in inflation. So in this video, let's cover what this all means right now, why it matters, and what it could signal is going to happen next, be it what Putin is actually forced to accept peace unfavorable to him, or another ditched attempt to keep control and prevent his entire regime from collapsing.
This is The Global Gambit.
How's it going? Welcome to the channel. Now, on the surface, Vladimir Putin has said some things that shocked even seasoned analysts. He told a press conference in Minsk that Russia was planning to cut military spending over the next few years. Yes, that means cut. Compare that to what we saw at the beginning of last week, when NATO agreed to increase collective spending to 5% of GDP over the next decade. So why would Putin even float this idea while fighting this costly war of conquest? What's really behind these defense cuts? And what's this connection with Trump, trade with China, and a new wave of secrecy laws across Russia? Because there's a lot that the media will mention, but not necessarily cover. I genuinely do believe that we could be at a turning point here. Not that the war will wrap up tomorrow, but that Putin is going to have to make some unprecedented decisions about the longevity of his war or the longevity of his regime. Now, to be specific, the exact quote Putin said was, "We are planning to reduce defense spending for us next year and the year after. Over the next 3-year period, we are planning this." That's despite the fact that in 2025, Russia hiked defense spending by over 25% to over 6% of overall GDP. Now, keep in mind, Russia's economy is very different depending upon how you measure it, but the point is it still makes incredible amounts of contributions relative to the size of its economy, say, than compared to America. That's basically Cold War level spending, and nearly a third of all federal spending is now military related. Defense factories are running 24/7. Bonuses are being thrown at soldiers to sign up, as much as $20,000. Compensation is flowing to dead soldiers' families, and all of that is paid for by higher inflation, declining energy revenues, and this growing budget deficit. So where exactly would the cuts even come from then? Well, the truth is they probably won't. But the message is political, not fiscal. Putin is trying to reframe Russia not as the aggressor, but the reasonable party here. But let's not waste any qualms about this. This is not something Putin does unless he is really up against it. When he is backed into a corner of this extent, and he has to make such public acknowledgements, it's not good. During that same conversation in Minsk, Putin actually thanked Trump for his peace efforts, quoted as saying it turned out to be more difficult than it seemed from the outside. Now, that's certainly not a coincidence. It's more theatre. Putin is being as theatrical as Trump is, because again, he still would like to get some kind of concessions from Washington, be them sanctions relief for frozen front lines and a path to some kind of consolidation around the territorial gains he's made. Putin's message here, therefore, is largely the same. We're open to peace, but blame NATO still. And given that Trump has seemingly appreciated NATO, but still hasn't confirmed whether the United States will continue to support Article 5, he's made some very concerning statements for European capitals about whether or not the mutual defense clause is something that the United States would actually adhere to, means that, well, Putin believes he can still try to squeeze Trump if done correctly. At the same time, Putin's talking about peace and budget cuts, he's also expanding Russia's state secrecy laws. There have been suggestions of new laws that information about foreign policy, trade, science, mobilization, and even internal economic decisions can all be classified now. Many people say that this isn't about a new mobilization. It's about hiding bunkers, drone targets, and the infrastructure actually behind Putin's regime's survival. It's about destroying that transparency around Russia's collapsing economy, because if that happens, well, Putin's got to make some pretty extreme contingency plans. And, well, Moscow has already stopped publishing military casualties. Oil production numbers are largely gone. Budget data is incredibly limited. And even discussing trade flows or inflation could become an actual criminal offense. If the spending cuts were genuine, therefore, you wouldn't need to hide the books. And so if you've made it this far, then, well, leave your comments below as to whether you think Putin is bluffing once again, or is he flat broke this time? And consider subscribing as well. I promise no hysteria, just straight to the point analysis. Now, while Russia hides from the West, it's becoming, as we know, incredibly dependent on the East. The reliance on North Korean troops to battle in Kursk, Iran, or seemingly not now after the past couple of weeks, and of course, China. In the first 5 months of 2025, aluminium exports to China jumped nearly 60%. Copper exports, 66%. Nickel exports more than doubled. China is now Russia's unequivocal, indisputable economic lifeline. With Europe effectively shut off, over $240 billion in trade flowed between Moscow and Beijing last year. Russian giants like Norilsk Nickel and Rusal are rerouting metals into Chinese stockpiles. In some cases, companies are working with Chinese miners to ship directly, or using intermediaries like Glencore to get around these global restrictions. But this isn't resilience. There's a lot of emphasis about the resilience of the Russian economy, and to a point it has been true. Economic sanctions have not been as impactful as was expected or hoped in the first couple of years, and the Russian government, especially the central bank, have been quite crafty at working around or mitigating the deeper impacts or disruptions from the sanctions. But increasingly they're running out of options, and so this resilience becomes dependency. Russia may still sell metals, but it can't set the price. It can't pick the buyer, and it can't escape the fact that without specifically China, most of all, its extractive economy is in free fall. Now, let's be honest and obvious here. Putin, as always, wants to and needs to appear strong. He is the pin-up strongman, a wartime leader who can win the war, cut spending, and bring peace all at once, especially to his country and people. But the reality is brutal and much different. The war is nowhere near over. Ukraine continues to pile on the pressure, infiltrate Russian airspace with drones, and seemingly conduct, well, espionage. The economy is straining under the weight of its own militarization, and the sanctions are increasingly bleeding that revenue. So Russia's only reliable partner is a country that treats it more like a supplier, more like a client state, not a peer. Meanwhile, also, that internal repression is growing. Laws that are silencing journalists, economists, and even data collectors is gaining more scrutiny. That's not strength. That's fear of scrutiny. So when Putin talks about budget cuts, what he's really offering is a message not to his own people, but to Western voters. And we can see this from Russian state media. Increasingly, you do see public criticisms, acknowledgement that things are not good. reports of Russian soldiers, well, doing unspeakable things to other Russian soldiers. I can't mention the word because of the YouTube algorithm, but I'll put a piece on the screen now what I'm talking about. So, well, this largely depends on what options Putin has outside of China or internally. He would ideally like to see Trump stay on side. Putin wants to be ready, but not with the victory, but with a ceasefire deal that will be able to lessen the pressures that seem to be occurring. So the fact that Putin has to, for once in a blue moon, acknowledge such a thing of, well, we actually have to consider spending cuts on the very aspect of his economy that he needs to continue if he wants to sustain this war indefinitely, shows that he doesn't consider to see it indefinitely, that it has a time horizon, a limitation, that there's a viability to it that he has to consider. That's why he's playing the budget card right now. But whether it's real or not, the economic crisis behind it is very real. The secrecy, we've seen the Chinese do this over demographics figures, the China pivot itself, the shrinking budget, it all points to a regime that is running out of room to maneuver. It has done it for 3 years. It has managed it quite impressively, but it can't continue to, pull the certain policy tools that it has, redirect things as it has done, make excuses for shifts in, say, pensions or other fiscal changes. And that should matter, not just for Ukraine, but for all of us watching this play out in ways we weren't meant to see. And certainly Putin doesn't want you to see. Now, I do hope you enjoyed this video. My name is Pyotr and I am half English and half Russian, which means that with this channel, I am trying to bring a unique or unusual blend of someone who's been brought up predominantly in the West, but with a strong influence from Slavic or Russian influences to understand that heritage and the differences between the two. I have studied, worked, lived within both Ukraine and Russia, as well as working professionally in sectors like the United Nations, the World Bank, and the NGO sector, including with the International Crisis Group, being on the field in the battlegrounds. And on the show, I do talk to diplomats, journalists, thought leaders, activists, people of all walks, to try to ascertain a better understanding comprehensively, not just one-sided, but to engage also with the narratives that we may well find uncomfortable, but we have to engage with if we want to bring them round to our understanding and illustrate why they are misguided. If you appreciate that and what I'm trying to do here, then do consider subscribing and liking the video, and drop a comment about whether you think this is Putin's, time or not. And if you want to support me further, then you can do so by becoming a member or looking at the Patreon, where I do have more unique things as well. But that's it. See you in the next one, everyone. Take care.